Mara Langley had exactly 3 minutes to make it to the interview of her life, and she was already 2 minutes behind. She darted through the glass doors of the downtown office building, heels clicking, hair flying, her thrift store blazer flapping behind her like a cape. The elevator had just closed. Of course. She cursed under her breath and spun around toward the staircase, eyes locked on her phone screen to double-check the floor number, and that's exactly when she slammed face first into a chest, a firm, broad, coffee-holding chest. Hot liquid exploded between them. Mara gasped, stumbling back as the man took a quick step forward, steadying her with one hand on her elbow. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she blurted, eyes wide as she looked up. He was tall, ridiculously tall. Clean cut, dark hair, sharp jawline, and the kind of eyes that made her forget what universe she was in. But at the moment, all she could focus on was the large brown stain spreading across his crisp white dress shirt. "It's fine," the man said, voice low and calm in a way that didn't match the disaster on his shirt. "Are you okay? I'm fine. Are you, oh God, I ruined your shirt. You probably have a meeting or something and She looked down at the mess of coffee dripping from his sleeve. "Seriously, I'm so sorry." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. Who even carried those anymore, really? He offered a teasing smile as he dabbed at the shirt. "I should have seen you coming. You're like a missile in heels." Mara flushed. "I was late. I am late. For an interview, I wasn't watching where I was going." He tilted his head, eyes flicking down to her scuffed pumps and then back up. "Which company?" "Langdon and Moore, PR assistant position." Something shifted in his expression, but he nodded casually as if the name meant nothing to him. "You're heading to the 27th floor," he said, already pressing the elevator button. "Come on, I'll take you up." She hesitated. "You don't have to, it's the least I can do," he said. "Considering I spilled coffee all over myself just to meet you." That made her smile. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime and they stepped inside. Mara tried not to fidget. Her nerves were already high, and now she was trapped in a metal box with a man who smelled like cedar and espresso and looked like he belonged on the cover of Fortune. "I'm Mara," she offered, glancing up at him. He looked down at her, eyes warm. "Yarin Tate." The name meant nothing to her. "Thanks again for not yelling at me," she said. "Most people would've. I've had a day." Yarin chuckled. "You'd be surprised how many people bump into me holding coffee." The elevator dinged. 27th floor. As the doors opened, Mara stepped out, turned to thank him again, but he was already gone. The interview was a blur. She didn't even remember what she said. All she knew was that her heart was still pounding from the elevator, from the crash, from Yarin's smile. She didn't expect anything to come from it. Not the interview, not the coffee incident. Definitely not the man, until 3 days later when she got a call from Langdon and Moore. "You got the job," the HR manager said cheerfully. "You start Monday." Mara blinked. "Wait, really?" "And Mr. Langdon wants you working directly out of the executive suite. You'll be assisting on the new Westbridge campaign." She nearly dropped the phone. That Monday, she stood in front of the sleek glass doors of the executive floor, tugging nervously at her blazer. She stepped inside and froze. Yarin Tate stood at the head of the conference table, wearing a new white dress shirt. No coffee stains this time. He looked up and his face lit up when he saw her. "Miss Langley," he said smoothly, "welcome aboard." Her brain short-circuited. "You," she breathed. "You work here?" He gave a half shrug. "Something like that." It took 10 seconds for her to notice the way the assistants flitted around him, the way the room stilled when he spoke, the way the CEO of Langdon and Moore, Mr. Langdon himself, called him sir. She leaned over to one of the other assistants. "Who is he?" The girl looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're kidding, right? That's Yarin Tate. He owns half this company." Mara's mouth went dry. Millionaire, possibly more, and she dumped coffee all over him. That afternoon, he called her into his office. It was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek black furniture, and a view that made her knees weak. Yarin stood behind the desk, arms crossed, watching her walk in. "You didn't know who I was, did you?" he asked, voice tinged with amusement. "Nope," she said honestly. "Still wish I hadn't drenched you in caffeine," he chuckled. "Honestly, it was the best thing that happened to me that day," she blinked. Really, he stepped around the desk, hands in his pockets. Yeah, you were, real. Everyone in this world is so polished and rehearsed. You were chaos and honesty and late to an interview, and you still managed to charm the hell out of half my board. She tried to breathe normally. It wasn't working. I didn't charm anyone, she mumbled. You charmed me. Silence. Her eyes met his. He didn't look away. I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable, he said, stepping closer. I just wanted you to know that I see you, and I'm not going to pretend I don't want to know more. Mara's heart was a mess of nerves and adrenaline. I just started working here, she said quietly. I know, he replied. Which is why I'm going to be very professional and very patient, but I'm not going to pretend I'm not interested, she swallowed. What happens if I say I'm not? He smiled, soft and sure. Then I'll still respect you. And I'll still make sure you succeed. And if I say I am, his gaze darkened just a little, then I'll ask you to dinner. She hesitated, then nodded. His smile broke wide. Friday night, she echoed. As she left his office, her cheeks burning, she couldn't help but think about the ridiculous, unbelievable way life had twisted. She'd bumped into a man holding coffee, and now, somehow, he was going to take her to dinner. The restaurant didn't have a sign. Just a single black door tucked between a designer boutique and an art gallery, the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times and never notice unless someone showed you. Yarin had. Mara stood in front of it, wringing her fingers together, her breath fogging in the cool evening air. A car had dropped her off his car, but he hadn't told her what to expect, only that he'd sent a driver and that she should bring an appetite. The door opened quietly. A man in a tailored jacket greeted her by name and stepped aside. Inside, everything shifted. The lighting was low and golden, the air fragrant with saffron and citrus. The space was quiet, intimate, the noise of the city left outside. There couldn't have been more than 10 tables, and only 3 were occupied. In the far corner, Yarin stood as she was led to him. He wore a slate gray jacket over a black shirt, sleeves turned up just enough to reveal a watch that probably cost more than her student loan debt. But it wasn't the outfit that made her heart stutter, it was the way he looked at her when she approached. Like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. You found it, he said, stepping forward to pull out her chair. I almost didn't, she replied with a nervous smile. I thought I was heading into a storage room, he laughed softly. That's half the charm. She sat, smoothing the hem of her dress, a navy one she'd borrowed from her roommate, the only thing in their apartment that could pass for dinner date appropriate. I didn't even know places like this existed, she said, glancing around. Is it new? It's older than it looks, Yarin said as he sat across from her. They don't advertise, no website, no menu either. The chef sends out whatever he feels like making. She raised an eyebrow. So this is a mystery dinner, call it an adventure, he said, leaning back. Unless you've got a food allergy I didn't ask about. Nope, she replied. But if they serve something still moving, I'm not responsible for what I do. He grinned, and the candlelight caught the edge of his jaw as he relaxed further into his seat. A server appeared silently, pouring glasses of chilled white wine before disappearing again. Mara picked hers up, swirling it carefully. So, she said, what made you decide to take your employee to dinner? I'm not taking my employee to dinner, Yarin said, lifting his glass. I'm taking someone I want to know to dinner. You just happen to work at my company. That's a fine line, she replied, sipping. I'm good at walking lines, he said. Besides, you don't report to me directly. There's no conflict, she considered that. Still feels. Risky? I like risks, he said, then paused. But I won't take one you're not comfortable with. She set her glass down. I guess I'm just not used to this. This whole thing, she gestured, meaning the table, the place, the wine, him. You, this level of. Everything? Yarin studied her for a moment, then leaned forward. Do you want me to tone it down? She shook her head. No, I just don't want to get lost in it. You won't, he said quietly. You're not the kind of woman who gets lost. Before she could answer, the first course arrived, tiny handmade tortellini in a saffron-infused broth, garnished with edible gold. Mara blinked at it. Okay, now I know I'm in another dimension. Just taste it, Yarin said with a smile. She did and promptly closed her eyes. Okay, well, that's illegal, right? Food isn't allowed to be this good, he laughed. Wait until dessert. As the courses kept coming, grilled quail with pomegranate glaze, a citrus sorbet cleanser, and a main course of seared sea bass with truffle foam, Mara found herself loosening. The wine helped. So did the way Yarin never once made her feel like she didn't belong there. He didn't flaunt, didn't brag, didn't make her feel like he was trying to impress her. He was just present. "So," she said, halfway through the sea bass, "is this your usual Friday night?" "No," he said. "Usually I'm at my desk until 10, eating whatever the assistant brings me." "Cold noodles if I'm lucky," she laughed. "And you willingly gave that up for this." "I told you," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "You were the best thing that happened to me that week." She looked down at her plate, unsure of what to do with that. "Do you always say things like that?" she asked. "Only when I mean them." She chewed slowly, trying to deflect the emotions rising in her chest. "What made you go into PR?" He tilted his head, thinking. "I didn't, at first. No, I was in finance, numbers, deals, buyouts, that kind of thing. But I hated it. There's no soul in numbers, just profit. PR was messier but more human. I liked that," she nodded. "So you started buying into firms." "I started building one," he said. "Langdon was my first partner. We started in a strip mall office with a broken copier and a single intern." She stared. "Wait, you built Langdon and Moore?" He nodded. "The Moore was my college roommate. He left 5 years ago. I kept the name." Mara leaned back. "That's wow," he shrugged. "It wasn't glamorous. There were nights I slept in the office. We ate instant noodles for 3 years straight, but it taught me how to fight for what I wanted." "And what do you want now?" she asked before she could stop herself. He didn't answer right away. He set down his fork, eyes never leaving hers. "This." Her breath caught. Dinner ended with a dessert so delicate she didn't even try to guess what it was. Something with lavender, honey, and a sugar lattice that shattered under her spoon. When they stepped outside, the city was quieter. The driver waited at the curb. Yarin turned to her. "I can have him take you home, or if you'd rather I can walk you." She glanced down the street, then back at him. "Walk me." They strolled in silence for a while, footsteps echoing on the concrete. The night was cool but not cold, and the city lights shimmered off car hoods and glass windows. "You don't seem like someone who grew up in this world," he said. "I didn't," she replied. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. My mom worked double shifts. My dad left when I was 7. I got a scholarship, worked retail through college." The usual underdog story. He looked over at her. "That's not usual, that's survival," she shrugged. "It's just life. You say that like it's nothing. It was hard, but I'm not ashamed of it." "Good," he said, his voice quiet. "You shouldn't be." They stopped outside her building. She turned to face him. "Thank you," she said. "For dinner, for all of it." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "Can I see you again?" She hesitated for one breath, then nodded. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I meant it, you know. I want to know you. The real you." She looked up at him, heart thudding. "Then you better get used to chaos and honest opinions and me being late to things." "I'll take it all," he said, voice steady. She stepped back, her fingers already reaching for her keys. "Just don't expect me to spill coffee every time," he smiled. "I'll bring the coffee next time." She watched him walk away, heart full of things she didn't have names for. Upstairs, in her tiny apartment, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, her head spinning. She'd gone to dinner with a man who could buy the building she lived in without blinking, but he'd looked at her like she mattered more than the building ever could. And somehow, that terrified her more than anything. The next week unfolded like a dream Mara didn't know how to interpret. It wasn't just the dinner, or the way Yarin had looked at her outside her building like she was something he'd been searching for without knowing it. It was how he didn't pull away after that night. He didn't disappear, didn't suddenly become busy or vague. He texted her when he landed in Chicago for a meeting, sent her a photo of a street saxophonist he said reminded him of her energy, and called her on a Tuesday evening just to hear her voice. At work, he stayed professional. He didn't hover. He didn't make things awkward. But she always felt when he entered a room. It was like gravity shifted, quiet, powerful, invisible but impossible to ignore. Still, she kept her head down and focused. The Westbridge campaign was no joke. The client was demanding, the timeline was tight, and Mara was still proving herself. She wasn't about to let anyone think she was coasting on charm or connections. One afternoon, as she organized files after a tense client meeting, her direct supervisor, Leela, leaned in the doorway. "You're doing good work, Langley," she said, arms folded, "but take a breath once in a while. You don't have to outrun yourself." "I'm just trying not to mess it up," Mara replied, flipping through the binder. "You're not," Leela said. "But I'm saying this as someone who's been here a while. Pace matters in this world. Burn out too early and the suits won't remember how hard you tried. They'll only remember when you fumbled." Mara nodded, tucking the advice away. Leela was sharp and didn't hand out compliments freely. Later that evening, as she packed up her things, she found a note in her inbox. No sender, no digital signature, just a short line: rooftop, 10 minutes. When she stepped out onto the rooftop terrace, the city was painted in deep blue and gold. Lights shimmered across windows, and the hum of traffic below felt miles away. A table had been set near the edge, tiny lanterns flickering above it. Yarin stood beside it, sleeves rolled up, 2 coffee cups in hand. "I didn't make a reservation this time," he said as she approached. "Thought I'd try something different." She looked around, stunned. "This is the rooftop of the building." "I'm aware," he said. "Technically, I own it," she laughed despite herself. "You're ridiculous." "Possibly," he said, handing her one of the cups, "but you like it." She sipped. It wasn't the coffee shop blend she was used to. It was richer, darker, with a hint of something floral. She raised an eyebrow. "Cardamom," he said. "You mentioned once that your mom used to make rice pudding with it." She stared at him. "You remember that?" "I remember most things you say," he replied, leaning against the railing. "Especially the ones you don't mean to share." She took another sip, unsure how to respond. The wind tugged at her hair and the warmth of the drink curled through her chest. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You could be with anyone, someone who already fits your world." He didn't hesitate. "That's exactly why. Everyone else fits too neatly. I've spent years surrounded by people who bend themselves into shapes to get closer to power. You don't bend, you just show up." "That's not always a good thing," she said. "It is to me." She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't just wealthy, he was weary. Not tired in the physical sense, but in the way someone gets when they've carried too much for too long. She wondered how many people actually saw him for who he was, not what he ran. "I don't need saving," she said quietly. "Good," he replied, "because I don't want to save you. I just want to be near you while you save yourself." The words landed heavier than she expected. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned on the railing beside him, watching the city breathe. "Have you always lived in New York?" she asked, changing the subject. "No," he said. "I grew up in Santa Fe, dry heat, dust storms. My mother ran a bookstore and my father left before I could really remember him." She glanced sideways. "So you know what it's like, starting with nothing." "I know exactly what it's like," he said. "My first office chair was a plastic lawn chair. The kind that cuts into your legs if you sit too long." She smiled faintly. "Mine was a milk crate. They stood there for a while, 2 people from separate worlds who realized they weren't all that different inside. Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The struggle," he said. "Not really. But I miss the clarity. Back then, everything was simple. You had a goal and you chased it. Now the more I have, the more complicated everything gets." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense." He turned toward her. "Are you afraid I'll change you?" "No," she said. "I'm afraid I'll lose myself trying to keep up." "Then don't keep up," he said. "Let me slow down instead." That made her heart twist in ways she hadn't expected. She wasn't used to people meeting her where she was. She was used to chasing, hustling, proving. They stayed on the rooftop until the lanterns flickered out and the chill crept in. He walked her to the lobby, and before they parted, he reached for her hand, not possessive, not demanding, just steady. "I want to take you somewhere this weekend," he said. "Someplace that isn't lit by boardrooms or skyline views." "Where? You'll see." She hesitated, then nodded. That Saturday, a car picked her up early. She didn't ask where they were going. Somehow, the not knowing made it more exciting. When they pulled up to a private hangar, her jaw dropped. A sleek black helicopter waited on the tarmac. Yarin stood beside it, wearing jeans, sunglasses, and a relaxed grin. "You're insane," she said as she stepped out. "Noted," he replied, "but come on. There's a vineyard in Hudson Valley I think you'll like. You're flying me to wine country." "I'm flying us to peace and fresh air," he said. "The wine is a bonus." Once they were in the air, Mara forgot to be nervous. The view was breathtaking: rolling hills, winding rivers, bursts of autumn color stretching in every direction. The vineyard was straight out of a movie. Rows of golden vines, a stone terrace overlooking the valley, and tables shaded by ivy-covered pergolas. They tasted wines, shared stories, and walked barefoot through the grass behind the estate, laughing as a breeze tugged at her hair. At one point, she caught him watching her, not with the heat of a man trying to impress, but with the quiet awe of someone amazed that she existed at all. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "I'm just thinking how impossible this should feel, but it doesn't." She looked around. "It feels real, exactly." They stayed until dusk, and on the flight back, she rested her head on his shoulder. He didn't move, just wrapped his arm around her and held her there like she belonged. Back in the city, as he walked her to her door, something unspoken tugged between them. "I'm not used to this," she said as they stood in the hallway outside her apartment. "Being wanted like this. Not for what I can give, but just for being." "I don't want anything from you," he said. "Just you." She looked up, heart pounding. "That scares me. Me too." Then he leaned in, and this time when his lips found hers, she didn't hesitate. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't tentative. It was a kiss that said, "This is happening whether we're ready or not." And as the door closed behind her later, heartbeat still echoing in her chest, all she could think was how fast everything was shifting, not just the world around her, but the one inside her too. Mara rushed into the office Monday morning, still breathless from the weekend. The elevator had barely closed behind her, and she was already replaying the vineyard, the helicopter, the way Yarin had kissed her like the world might shift off its axis if he didn't. But now, back beneath the fluorescent lights and sleek glass walls of Langdon and Moore, everything was sharper, faster, louder. She tucked those memories away like a secret she wasn't quite ready to share with the world. The Westbridge campaign had entered its most chaotic stretch, and all hands were on deck. Deadlines loomed, clients called at all hours. Mara's desk became a fortress of mock-ups, samples, and color-coded timelines. She didn't see Yarin much. Their schedules barely overlapped, and when they did, it was in passing in brief meetings where he was all business, never lingering longer than absolutely necessary. It was the first time Mara realized how much she missed the quiet between them. 2 weeks passed without a dinner, a rooftop, or a vineyard. Just one long blur of work, exhaustion, and wondering if she'd imagined what they'd started. She didn't want to be needy. She didn't want to ask, but the silence grew louder than any words could. Then came the gala. Langdon and Moore's annual PR industry fundraiser was the kind of event that made headlines. Red carpet arrivals, champagne fountains, auctioned art by names Mara had only ever read about, and a guest list that required not just status, but power. Mara had planned to watch it unfold from the behind-the-scenes command center like the other junior staff. She didn't even own a dress remotely suitable for attending. So when a courier arrived that afternoon with a black garment bag, she stared at it like it might explode. She unzipped it slowly. Inside was a floor-length gown in deep midnight blue, sculpted at the waist, the fabric softer than anything she'd ever touched. A handwritten note rested on top: "Wear this tonight. I want to dance with you." Why she stared at the note, heart pounding, unsure if she wanted to laugh or cry. It wasn't a command, it wasn't an assumption, it was a request, and it unraveled every last knot of doubt she'd been carrying. That night she stepped out of the car and onto the red carpet. Cameras flashed, voices called names she didn't recognize, and for a moment she froze. But then she saw Yarin. He stood at the entrance in a black tuxedo, his hair slicked back, sharp and magnetic. But when he saw her, something in his face shifted. His jaw eased, his eyes softened, and when she reached him, he didn't greet her with words. He simply took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "You look like every reason I've ever worked this hard," he said under his breath. She swallowed hard. "You clean up okay yourself." He didn't let go of her hand the entire way inside. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and crystal, music humming beneath the buzz of conversation. Yarin introduced her to people with ease: executives, clients, politicians. but he never introduced her as his date or an employee. Each time he simply said, "This is Mara Langley," like her name alone was enough. When the music shifted to something slower, he led her to the dance floor without asking. "You've been avoiding me," she said as they moved together. He didn't flinch. "I've been protecting you." "From what?" "From the way people talk," he said quietly. "From the way they twist things. You earned your place here. I didn't want anyone saying otherwise." "You think I care what they say?" "I know you don't," he said, "but I do. I care what hurts you." That silenced her. For all the grand gestures, it was that his quiet, steady defense that cracked something open inside her. "I thought maybe you were regretting this," she admitted. He pulled her a fraction closer. "Not for a second." They danced until the song faded, and even then, he didn't let go. Later, as the auction began and the lights dimmed, he leaned toward her. "There's something I want to show you." She followed him through a side door, down a narrow hallway, and out onto a small terrace overlooking the city. It was quieter out here, the noise of the gala dulled by glass and distance. "I didn't want to share you with all of them," Yarin said. "Not tonight. I don't need a crowd," she replied. "I just need you." He turned toward her then, and the expression he wore wasn't one of charm or power. It was something rawer, braver. "I've built a lot in my life," he said. "Companies, wealth, reputation. But I've never had something that made me feel like all of it was worth it. Until you." She froze. "I know this is fast," he went on. "And I know you probably think I live in a world that doesn't make space for real things. But this what's between us, it's the most real thing I've felt in years." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm in love with you." Her breath hitched. "Yarin, you don't have to say it back, not yet. But I need you to know." She looked at him, this man who had built empires and still looked at her like she was something sacred, and suddenly all the confusion, all the fear dissolved. "I do love you," she whispered. "I've been trying to pretend I didn't, but I do." He exhaled like he'd just come up for air, and then he kissed her slow, deep, certain. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come with me this weekend," he said. "Somewhere far." "Just us?" "Where? Does it matter?" She shook her head. That Friday they boarded his private jet to Santorini. The villa overlooked the sea, white stone against endless blue. He made breakfast barefoot. She read on the terrace wrapped in his hoodie. They swam, they danced under the moon, they made love like they were discovering new languages in each other's arms. It wasn't a vacation. It was a surrender. On their last night, as the sun dipped below the cliffs, Yarin pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Mara stared at it, stunned. "Are you?" "I know this is fast," he said, voice steady, "but I've built my life around instincts, and every instinct in me says I want a life with you, not someday, now." She opened the box. Inside sat a ring, delicate, vintage, with a sapphire at the center. "I had it reset," he said. "It belonged to my mother. She used to say love wasn't about timing, it was about truth." Her eyes filled. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She didn't answer with words. She just nodded, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. They flew back to the city as fiancés. The announcement made headlines the next day. Her inbox exploded. So did his. But none of it mattered, because they knew what they had was real. They married in the spring. A quiet ceremony in the garden of his mother's old bookstore, which he'd bought and restored without telling her. The few guests sat among wildflowers, and Mara walked down the aisle barefoot, laughing through tears. He kissed her before the officiant even gave permission. Later, as the sun set and music played, she curled against him on a bench beneath blooming trees. "Remember when I spilled coffee on you?" she asked. He smiled, kissing her temple. "Best accident of my life. Do you ever think about how it all happened so fast?" "I think about how it felt inevitable," he said. "Like we were always going to find each other." She looked down at the ring on her finger, then up at the man who had changed everything, and she knew, without question, that she had bumped into the rest of her life. Mara stood in front of the mirror in their brownstone bathroom, brushing her damp hair as the early morning sun filtered through the frosted glass. The light caught the sapphire on her finger, sending a soft blue glint across the tiles. She paused, watching it, heart still skipping in disbelief. As if even now, months later, it still didn't feel entirely real, not just the ring, but the entire life she'd somehow fallen into. The wedding had passed in a whirlwind of color and laughter, and everything that followed had been just as dreamlike. The world now knew her as Mara Langley Tate. The name had trended on every social media platform the day after the wedding, but she ignored it all. She had never cared about headlines. Her world revolved around the quiet mornings when Yarin pressed a kiss to her shoulder before making coffee. The evenings they spent curled up with music humming low in the background, and the way he always waited for her to speak first in every room, never once trying to speak for her. Behind her, Yarin stepped into the doorway, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, 2 mugs in hand. He set one beside her on the counter and leaned against the frame, watching her in the mirror. "You're staring at that ring again," he said. "Should I be jealous?" She smiled without turning. "Just making sure it's still real. I can assure you it is, and so is the man who keeps trying to find new ways to make you happy. You're doing all right so far. I'm aiming for unforgettable." She laughed, taking the mug and sipping. "You know, I used to think people like you didn't exist. Powerful, generous, absurdly well-dressed men who fall in love with women like me." Yarin stepped closer and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "People like you are the reason men like me stop pretending any of the rest of it matters." They were interrupted by the soft buzz of the intercom downstairs. Mara arched a brow. "You expecting someone?" He shook his head. "Not unless the florist is early." She followed him down the stairs. The brownstone was warm and filled with soft morning light, the kind of home that felt lived in, not staged. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a record player sat beside the fireplace, a Miles Davis vinyl still resting on the turntable from the night before. Yarin opened the front door, and a young woman in business casual attire stood there, holding a thick envelope. "Mr. Tate," she said with a practiced smile. "I'm with the New York Historical Society. We've finalized the restoration plans for the bookstore you donated. I wanted to deliver the documentation personally, as requested." Mara blinked. "Wait, the bookstore?" Yarin took the envelope, thanked the woman, and closed the door. He turned to Mara with a sheepish look. "I was going to surprise you. But I guess the universe wanted to ruin that part." "You bought the bookstore?" she asked, stunned. "I didn't just buy it. I funded a full restoration. Your mother's recipes, the old corner reading nook, the community board, all of it's coming back. And we're naming it after her." Mara pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "You remembered all of that?" "I remember everything you love." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "How is it possible I keep loving you more?" "Probably because I keep giving you reasons." They spent the afternoon going over the plans. The bookstore would reopen in the fall, complete with a small cafe in back and a scholarship fund for underserved students who wanted to study literature or communications. Yarin had already spoken to the city council and secured local partnerships. By late evening, they found themselves seated on the couch, takeout containers spread between them, a documentary playing softly in the background. Mara leaned against him, her head tucked beneath his chin. "I've been thinking," she said. "I don't want to keep working in PR forever." He didn't tense, didn't flinch. He simply waited. "I love the job, I'm grateful for it, but I want to build something of my own, something that doesn't require me to climb ladders I don't believe in." He shifted slightly, angling toward her. "What do you want to build?" "A media program for high school girls," she said slowly. "To teach them how to use their voice, how to write, speak, pitch ideas, how to walk into a room and know they belong there." Yarin's eyes lit with something fierce and proud. "That's brilliant. I don't have the resources yet, or the connections. You have me. I don't want to use you." "You're not using me," he said. "You're letting me help you change the world." She looked into his eyes. "You really think I can do it?" "I think you're going to redefine what's possible." They spent the next few weeks drafting proposals, connecting with community leaders, and quietly laying the foundation for what they would later call the Voice Project. Yarin never once tried to take over. He offered resources, advice, and introductions, but every decision was hers. Mara met with school principals, spoke on panels, and built a board of women from diverse industries. By the end of the summer, the initiative had secured its first round of funding, and a pilot program was set to launch that fall in 3 schools across the city. At the same time, the bookstore reopened. The ribbon-cutting ceremony brought out the entire neighborhood. Kids Mara hadn't seen since high school hugged her. Her mother's recipe for cardamom rice pudding was printed on the first page of every menu in the cafe. Mara stood inside the doorway, watching as people wandered the aisles, some reading, some laughing, some just taking it all in. Yarin joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "You did this," she whispered. "No," he said, "you did. I just helped shine the light a little brighter." As the night wound down and the store emptied, they sat on the old couch from her childhood, now roof-upholstered and nestled in the corner reading nook. "I never thought this would be my life," she said. "I did," he replied. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss the chase, the adrenaline of deals, the next big acquisition?" "I used to," he said. "But now, I wake up beside the woman I love, help her build something that matters, and spend my nights in places filled with heart, not hollow ambition. I've never been more alive." They sat there in silence, the kind that came when everything that needed to be said had already been spoken with action, not words. That fall, the Voice Project launched. Mara gave the opening speech at a Brooklyn high school, standing in front of 200 girls wearing matching T-shirts that read, "I belong here." Yarin stood at the back of the auditorium, arms crossed, eyes never leaving her. Afterward, as the students surrounded her with questions and excitement, he waited patiently. When the last girl hugged her and ran off to join her friends, he stepped forward. "You were magic up there," he said. "I felt like I was finally doing what I was meant to do." "You are," she reached for his hand. "This is our life now." "No," he said, "this is just the beginning." That night they returned to the brownstone, no grand events, no headlines. Just 2 people in love with a future they were building one honest, beautiful step at a time. And in the quiet that followed, as they lay tangled in each other beneath soft covers, Mara whispered into the dark, "I think we're going to be really happy." Yarin kissed the curve of her shoulder. "We already are."